All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for your attendance today. I do want to call this meeting of the Industrial Development Board of the Board of Directors to order. It is here right at 10:13 here on Wednesday, September 13th. And again, calling this meeting to order as it appears we do have a quorum. Moving on to item number 2 on the agenda, public comment period. The Industrial Development Board holds a designated public comment period at each meeting. Members of the public in attendance may provide comments to the board or its committees during such designated time. No advance registration is required. Is there anyone here from the public wishing to speak during the public comment period? All right, as there is no one here from the public wishing to speak, we will move to close the public comment period. So we will now move to item number 3 on your agenda, consideration of prior meeting minutes. If you see, I'll give everyone a couple minutes to do a review of this. We have 3 meeting minutes here, so we have February 8th minutes, and there was a correction that needs to be made on names, so we have that one. We also have the June 14th meeting minutes. If you recall, that was the main items we did in that meeting were the cash grant incentive payment approvals. And then we have the minutes from last month's meeting on August 9th. So I'll give everyone a quick minute to review those. Certainly if everything is aligned and if everyone is in agreement on what's presented in those meeting minutes, we can entertain approvals, or I can entertain approvals for all of them.
Since they were given with us prior to the meeting, I moved that we accept the minutes as read.
For
All 3.
okay. All right, so we have a proper motion on the table.
I'll second.
We have a second, motion been properly second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor with the minutes, approval of the February 8th, June 14th, and August 9th, 2023 minutes of the Industrial Development Board, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say nay. All right, motion carried, motion approved. Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 4, Chairman's Report. What I'd like to do today, and certainly we did this last year at affordable meeting focused on affordable workforce housing last year, but certainly excited to have Angie Hubbard here today, Director of Housing Division with Metro. So certainly want to give her as much time and give this board an opportunity to ask questions on housing. So in my chairman's report today, what I'd like to do is briefly let my colleagues here, obviously we have an ad hoc committee now, and we had a meeting this morning, and what I'd like to do is have one of the members from our ad hoc committee during this period share our mission statement that we adopted as an ad hoc committee, and certainly overall to the board if there's any questions or comments on it. Let's talk about that now while we're waiting for Angie. Let's see. Vice Chair, do you want to read that for me?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. All right, so we worked, 4 of us, Tequila was also here last month. We did a draft last month, we edited it this morning for a new mission statement for the Industrial Development Board. Our old one was very mechanical. It is, and I'm pulling it up real quick. Our old one was, the function of the Industrial Development Board is to acquire, own, lease, and dispose of properties to the end that corporations might be able to promote industry and develop trade by inducing manufacturing, industrial, and commercial enterprises to locate in Nashville.
And that's currently on our website.
Yep. So we looked at sort of ring counties, what they were doing. We talked about what sort of goals and programs we want to see, and we started with mission. And so once we adopt a mission statement, then we will take that and do specific goals and programs from there. But this is what we came up with after talking about sort of what we think as a board we really care about, what we're doing today, and want to continue doing. You have it in front of you. You have a red line, so you can see where we started last month and where we ended up today. And we moved to adopt it and present it to the board for adoption. So I think at this point we would love any comments or feedbacks that y'all have.
Okay, so I do strategic planning and I do mission statements for nonprofits and companies. And the only thing I would say is to start with to cultivate, since at the National Industrial Development Board, because we have that as the head of it. So the thing with the mission statement is that we can repeat it. And like the Center for Nonprofit is to amplify our members and the people they serve. Boom, that's what the Center for Nonprofit. And so my advice was just start with to cultivate, because the heading would be Nashville Industrial Development Board or Metro Nashville. So that's just to make it tighter and cleaner.
So you're saying take out
Just to begin
everything else.
mission, and the mission is to cultivate economic
Uh-huh.
prosperity, enhance the quality of life. I don't know if you need for our community, because we know that's what we are at the top, by fostering sustainable growth, strategic investment, and innovative development initiatives. So that's all I'm saying is you can start with to cultivate. That's just-
Okay, yeah, because we have a mission statement, so no need to say mission up there as well.
Right, it just,
Okay.
yeah, so we're just
You
trying to,
missed that part.
just to clean it up,
Oh, so you're saying, yeah, just start with
Yeah.
to cultivate.
correct.
Okay.
Because the heading will say Metro Nashville Industrial Development Board. The mission is to cultivate la 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 la.
Oh, okay, so the mission is, okay. Got it.
So you will have mission and then probably semicolon and to cultivate.
Yeah, I'm with
That's
you.
what it-
Yeah,
that's-
you don't need to say the mission statement is, no, I'm
Yeah.
with you. Yeah.
Okay, so the mission statement is cool, okay, got it.
That is, if you want to tighten it up even more, enhance the quality
Yeah,
of life.
tighten it up for us.
Okay, well,
Hey,
that's what I do. So I would put, this is my, just looking at it real fast, to cultivate economic prosperity, enhance the quality of life. I would take out for our community, because we already know, I don't know, by fostering sustainable growth, strategic investment, and innovative development initiatives. Guided by the commitment to excellence and through collaboration, we strive to attract, retain, and expand businesses that contribute to the vitality of Nashville. So, the next question is that first sentence the mission, and is there a vision? Or did you go to that part?
We were discussing, do we actually need a vision?
Well,
I brought that up, man.
Like,
So the
maybe just splitting
mission-
it off.
yeah,
Yeah, it's too
you could
full.
split it up and make that first sentence or two sentences your mission, and then your vision is, guided by the commitment, excellence, you strive, because striving is part of the vision.
Hold on
I
before you
like
go.
that, yeah.
But hold on before you go there. So let me make sure I'm understanding you correctly. Even if we don't split it up, we would start off. Your comments are mission semicolon. All right, to cultivate economic prosperity and enhance the quality of life by fostering.
You can put for our community, I'm just saying,
That was yours saying though. Take out for our community.
I haven't spent a lot of time on
Sure,
this,
sure,
so,
sure. Yeah, you're okay. We're
for our community. We could put
You said communities, I mean,
for
just
our community.
full community, or.
I took that out automatically because we are the Industrial Development Board, but, the Metro Nashville. I'm just gonna put that in parentheses. If you're trying to adopt it now, you guys can keep it in.
no. I mean,
I just,
we don't have
to
to.
me, you use as few words as possible so
Sure.
that you can repeat it. And so we know it's for our community because it's Metro Nashville Industrial Development Board. So please, if you, feedback, this is just.
No. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
mission.
I think that's good. I think we're intentionally trying to make sure, and IDB work has historically been core focused, right?
Okay.
But I think you're right in that it picks up the whole, we should be the whole community.
And
And so
that's-
that's kind of what we were getting at,
And
but I
that's
would
good.
love your take on how to thread that needle.
And it has, prosperity enhance the quality of life of our community, because, it's called Metro Nashville Industrial Development Board, so we know that already. So in doing a statement, we're just trying to have it concise. So, we already know it's Nashville, so that's where, I'm trying to visualize it on a website. That's the first thing you do, it's the
Yeah, we-
mission, the
we
vision.
Took out the Nashville and all that, everything
Like
registered.
sustainable growth, strategic, and guided. We strive to check it. So I would, let's just leave it in there for now, because you have a reason. Like I said, I wasn't involved in that meeting earlier. The vision could also be, the vision is to create a transparent, responsible, dynamic environment that empowers entrepreneurs, Or that could be a second sentence to the mission. Just remember, the goal of a mission is to repeat it in an elevator.
It should be one sentence.
It should be one or
at the
two sentences,
most.
yeah. continue this with the
With
vision.
vision,
The vision is, you can even put values. You could put values under that, putting, what you said earlier. At the last sentence, the mission statement our core values, and you can say an objective, and you can list those. Because you're repeating the mission statement and encapsulates. So, I just got it 10 minutes ago.
No, no, yeah.
I agree with you. Yeah, split that up and turn it into mission, and then split it up in two different parts.
And I can work on it.
Yeah, what
Yeah.
I was gonna say, we just passed it in this meeting, which means it's probably not on the agenda to actually formally
That's right.
adopt today. And so getting comments back that then we could adopt
Okay.
next meeting is
Okay,
where
I would
we
be happy if I can get this in,
Can you,
Word document, then I
Okay.
can do it nice,
when you,
cleaner.
after the meeting, can you send out this in Word document to the entire board? And just, this is what the ad hoc committee came
And I'll
up
show
with.
some samples, mission, values, and you can put core, mission, vision, and core values,
Yeah.
Community to all, la la la, so
Yeah.
I'll be happy to work.
Overall, what are your thoughts on it?
It's
So it's
good.
got
It's
some
really
work,
good.
but
It's just long. We just need to
Yeah.
cut it up.
we have a lot we're trying to do,
We-
right?
This is where we should admit we worked for 45 minutes, and then Tequila comes in and she's like, "Have y'all asked chat?" And then
Putting all those
two
secrets
minutes
out.
later,
Oh, I do chat all the time.
it was. And at the same time, our
Chat guides
former-
us in our pushes us along to think differently is what IT does, so
the
AI does.
The former head of our convention center was giving a talk literally at the same hour across town, and they said, "How would your job be different today?" He was like, "Well, we spent a year on mission, vision, values, and I just asked chat today."
I'll be happy to look it over and just give you my recommendations.
No, we did feed information into chat. We didn't just
Yeah.
totally
I
tell
know.
it.
Thank you.
Chat guides us in motivating us to think outside the box.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Board Member Cordova, any comments or general feedback on this?
No, I
Reaction
mean,
to it?
I think Christina nailed it all on the head, and I think y'all are doing a great job with this, so.
All right.
I got nothing.
All right, we'll get this sent out. Well, without further ado, and certainly want to take advantage of the opportunity we have today, Angie Hubbard here with Housing Division Metro. And again, this is, Angie was in attendance at our ad hoc committee meeting last month, so she understands a lot of what this board is trying to do from a housing perspective. So I appreciate, Angie, you taking the time to come again. Obviously, you came last year as well, so thank you for your time today. Look forward to this presentation, and certainly look forward to the board members, any questions that you have. But very excited to have you here today. I think everybody got one.
Angie, there was a request that you sit over here so we
Okay.
can get you on
Oh, that's
camera.
right.
And if you're able to share this PowerPoint with us, we'll try to get it
She's
on our
gonna put it on the
website.
website, yeah. Thank you.
Brian took a chair with me through. And so
That's all right.
sitting
I'm
down with you.
just go out in the
No,
hallway.
no,
Who am I?
You can sit
I'm
there.
joking.
What are you talking
No,
about?
sit right here.
Put
So,
you front and center.
Oh.
yeah, for the video.
Well,
Yeah.
all right, here. I'll scooch.
No, you sit, no, it's fine. No, you're fine. Don't worry.
Musical
No,
chairs.
I wasn't trying to boot you.
I know where I'm loved and where I'm not.
Okay, well,
Perfect, yeah.
All right, well, thank you for inviting me in today to talk about housing. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. I am Angie Hubbard, the Housing Director for Metro Nashville. I am in the Planning Department, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. For people watching at home, this presentation, the technology wasn't working great, so we'll share it online later. But last year, and I think it was maybe within a couple of months after I started, I came before the IDB board and to talk about our new division. And so some of you may have heard some of this before, but I'm gonna just again give you a little context of who we are and what we're working on and how we see the collaboration with the IDB and other folks in this space. I just am so encouraged to attend meetings, to hear other Metro boards, commissions, departments talk about housing, because so long it's been in a vacuum, it's an afterthought, and that's how we've gotten to the deficit that we have. So I say all hands on deck, so I'm so appreciative for these hands that here. So I'm going to start out with just an overview of who we are. So again, I mentioned that we are in the planning department. Dating back, I don't know how many mayoral administrations, a housing function has been within a mayor's office working on, you know, some policies, some programs. The Barnes Fund has been administered out of the mayor's office, but then the overall big affordable housing development and tools were offered through MDHA, the Housing Authority, but they're not really in that policy space. So in 2021, when Mayor Cooper did the Affordable Housing Task Force, and we have some advocates here who have been pressing for a really long time about having a standalone office outside of a mayor's office that can survive a change of administration. So here we are. Yay. So this role I started in January of 2022. You'll see on the org chart. Lucy Kemp is the planning executive director, and then, but I have a great relationship with Lucy. Being in planning has been a really great space to be, because one of the big places where I feel a lot of growth around housing is how it connects to our land use and our regulatory environment. So that's great to have those conversations with my planning colleagues. We started out, and I'll show in just a minute, but we're going to be hiring 3 new positions this fiscal year. One is we're interviewing now for a program associate. We'll be hiring a compliance monitor for the Barnes Fund. We, over the past 4 years, almost half of the funding for the Barnes Fund has come through Mayor Cooper's administration. We're now at a portfolio of about $120 million. And already, close to 6,000 units in the pipeline, and more to come with the funding that we have for this fiscal year. And then the other one in blue that we're excited about is creating a land bank. That's something that's been talked about for a while. One of the first roles of the land bank is to establish a title clearing service when we transfer tax delinquent properties to nonprofits through the Barnes Fund. They come with clouded title. Yep. And it takes tens of thousands of dollars and years. And the land bank, it's an authority under state law that allows the title to be cleared in bulk and reduced. So we're going to take on those expenses. We got funded $500,000 to hire a person and to procure legal services to take that on. So we're looking forward to having hopefully that established by the spring.
Thank you.
So this will clear that land bank.
You're welcome, Mark.
Yeah.
You're welcome, Mark.
This is not so much the issue of getting, the bigger issue is the issues with the title because of the delinquency with the property taxes.
That's the first role of it, but the
Okay.
land bank has a bigger role that we'll work on evolving. But the first immediate need is this title clearing. But
Yeah,
then
that's a mess.
looking at how we can hold other properties, and then as maybe some strategic acquisitions down the road. So there's certainly more functions to explore, but this is an immediate one that we're focusing on. So in that context, in January of 2022, we started with 3 staff. The 2 folks, Hannah Davis and Ashley Brown in the mayor's office, came over and joined my team. We currently have 7 folks, and now by the end of this calendar year, we hope to have all 10 positions filled. So
Getting staffed up.
getting staffed up. You'll see this graphic. We're building the plane as we fly it. Because the Affordable Housing Task Force, one of the things that it did was had some high-level recommendations on new tools and policies. So we went ahead, started working on those things, kept the Barnes Fund going. We got ARPA dollars. So as we're staffing up, we're also still getting things out and not waiting for you'll hear me talk about a unified housing strategy. We're not waiting for more plans to be created. We're taking those high-level recommendations, and we've pretty much made significant progress on all of them except for dedicated revenue. That's the one that we're still have to explore in this coming year. So here I have, it's a lot of text. I won't go through all of it. It's our division values and beliefs. When we came together in January of 2022, we said we need a bold vision for that everything we do gets back to. And we said every Nashvilleian has housing security. and why we picked housing security, why we didn't say we need to increase affordable housing. It's more than sticks and bricks construction or preservation. Inventory is a huge part of it, but there are so many barriers that people that need housing the most still face, even if we have the inventory. Housing discrimination still exists. Benefits cliffs impact people's ability to really have economic growth without losing access to certain things. So there's so many ways that we are seeing housing and hope to bring together all the different players in this space to address those needs. And then we have just some guiding principles. These were established by the task force. All of our work that we do should have a reflection of addressing housing inequities, and especially racial inequities, pursuing innovative and creative solutions. So we have a culture of our team. I call it integrity of our work. And I have been in government my entire career, and I won't tell you how long that is. It started at the state, but why we articulated that now is we want to always be evolving. We never want to adopt a position, well, we're going to do this because it worked for us. It was easy for us to do. We always want to have the pulse on what's happening with our citizens, looking at best practices. Now, we are government, so the speed of government and getting stuff done is a little bit different, but our approach to things is always looking and not being happy with what we've already done, but how can we continue to improve? Connecting people to resources and to each other, as well as pathways to opportunity, and then having resilient solutions. Folks at lower incomes are less likely to be most likely to be impacted the deepest by an economic or climatic disaster and least able to respond. So we always think about that resiliency piece and all that we're working on with housing. So what are we really focusing on? I gave you a high level. Our starting point is with the Affordable Housing Task Force report. 52,000 units affordable to households at incomes 80% or below by 2030. People have taken that as we need to have all of those built. And that's really not what that means. It means we need to have that many units affordable to meet our current needs and future growth, but we really can't build our way out of it. We need to preserve what we have, because when we lose affordable housing, we have to add that much more to the pipeline, but it's keeping people in the housing that they have and making that affordable through them. Things like rental assistance, tax freeze programs. So we need to think of that bigger toolkit to make sure that that many units are affordable for people at that income age or income range. And then just building our staff capacity and laying groundwork for a comprehensive strategy. So here's something I want to spend just a minute with you guys on is what is affordable. So you all are talking about being in the affordable housing space. It's really important that we all understand what that means. There is a state law that for Nashville defines affordable housing and workforce housing. So when Metro uses any of its tools or resources, affordable housing is housing affordable to people at 60% of the AMI or below, and workforce is 61 to 120. So why that matters that you understand what this means. This is actually the outdated HUD income limits. We have the 2023, but what we don't have is the Davidson County median household income yet. The census puts that out. It comes out in October, so we'll update this chart. But what I want to really illustrate here is the 2021 median household income for all households in Davidson County was $65,348, okay? The area median income, which takes in account our whole MSA, that includes Williamson County, Sumner, Wilson, all of those counties, for all households is $96,700. So most of our households in Davidson County are actually at the 80% AMI or below. So when I'm approached about workforce housing, I get really skeptical sometimes because that workforce housing means someone could go up to 120. While having a good, healthy supply of housing is critical because we have pressure down if we don't have it for upper incomes. When we're focusing, especially our team, on incentives to create housing, it's to get at those lower incomes where the market's never going to get there. Our market will eventually correct, if it hasn't right now, down to the 100% AMI. The market will never get to housing, especially at 60% AMI or below, without an incentive or a subsidy. And so that's really critical for all of us to understand, that have tools that we can deploy. We've got to really be focusing on using our precious resources to get at that deeper affordability. And the deeper affordability we want to target, the more subsidy it takes to make a deal work. That's just something, I don't know if anybody has any questions or want to discuss that right now, but I always try to paint that picture in context. That's one of the questions I get, is what is affordable? So, yeah.
As we're looking to potentially create tools, has Metro done a study as to how much subsidy is needed for the different household income levels to create a unit? I know this fluctuates annually.
It does fluctuate. We are going, as part of our next step of our housing analysis, is that deep resource analysis, to look, once we have another gaps analysis done that takes what the Affordable Housing Task Force did and goes deeper and looks even at the racial side of it. What are the right resources to get to the right? Because a debt product doesn't work as for deep affordability. That's a grant program. And we'll talk about that in a little bit when we start talking about tools. So we are looking at what are the right types of incentives to get to the different levels of affordability.
Can I interrupt?
Yeah.
Improperly, because I'm not on the board. There are some folks that are using the word attainable housing. I know that's a controversial term and question. What does that mean? People say attainable, what are they talking about?
I view it as a way to get people not to cringe at the term affordable housing. But what we really want is our housing to be affordable to everyone at every income level and attainable. To me, attainable means not only is it affordable, but you can actually get in it. For example, we have affordable housing that is income targeted to lower incomes, but the barriers to get into that housing are still high, that people that need it the most can't get in. To me, when I hear the word attainable, it means anybody can get into it. So,
What do you mean by barriers?
Barriers such as you still have to have 3 times the rent to be able to afford it.
Okay.
You have a voucher, a Section 8 voucher, that's not counted, and so you can't qualify even though it's income restricted. So there are still some high barrier entry to different types of housing.
I am on the board chair of Habitat for Humanity, and while we can't afford, the land is costing so much more, everything has doubled in wood and nails and everything, that AMI is just not meeting what we can do. So we have to be creative, and do we get underwriting for the slab, because that's doubled, what it costs us, $125 just for a door is what we call it. So understanding that we're trying to be creative to try to get people who are qualified to get in, because the income hasn't gone up, but everything else has. So it's just a challenge of looking at not only building homes or neighborhoods, but building communities and in collaborating with that land and stuff. So that is a barrier for habitats.
And that's something we have to constantly look at. You all discussed metrics in your previous conversation. We have to be mindful of rising land costs, rising building costs, and the rent levels and price points that we need to have to make things affordable. That's where we have to come in and understand those things and say, while we might have been able to leverage the Barnes Fund 10-1 in places when land cost and construction costs were lower, we might have to be coming in with higher grant amounts, and that leverage might be 6-1. That doesn't mean that we're not being efficient. That means we're responding to the market forces that are causing housing prices to increase, and we have to buy that down through our subsidies and incentives. The next thing I just always highlight whenever I'm speaking is an equity lens. Fair housing is a really big deal to me. I've done a lot of fair housing work in the city in my role at MDHA previously, and affordable housing is not fair housing, and we all need to be mindful of that. Fair housing, there are still barriers. We actually have some targeted programs I'll talk about in a minute to increase home ownership for Black and brown families, because we have Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data that even at the same credit score, at the same income level, Black households are often charged a higher interest rate on home loans. And so we have to really understand that just because we're putting an affordable product out there, there still are disparities on who can access that. Language access is a huge barrier. So we are bringing that fair housing lens as we're creating new programs and incentives too.
Do you have any, are you looking at that federally and specifically like within Davidson County?
We look at what is happening in Davidson
Okay.
County.
Do you have any, I'm just curious, do you have any numbers on like ownership across like races, like you said, Black
We
and
do.
brown?
I don't have it on my
Okay.
head, but yes, we have that
Okay.
information.
And I'll just share, because I
Yeah.
do this for a living, is by the year 2040, it's projected that Davidson County demographics would be 34% Hispanic, 32% Caucasian, 27% Black, 7% other. Right now in our metro schools, we have 33% Hispanic, about 35% African American, 25% white. So when you have the data from different areas and you put on top of each other, it is going to be what we're facing in our future. So language barriers or whatever is an opportunity as
Yeah.
well as a barrier.
And then there's even some cultural barriers on being able to borrow money. And so there have to be creative lending products there. Yeah.
You mentioned data. Is the data that Nigel was requesting, is that in your dashboard?
That is not in our dashboard, but I will make a note of that.
And then just predatory lenders are out there too. With
Yeah,
Black
oh,
and brown. And
yes.
that's what the advocacy is, what we have to do is the predatory lenders.
We have, our dashboard doesn't break down by demographics in its current iteration. Thanks for that. So what are we doing? So we're approaching housing security through 4 targeted approaches: building new, preserving the existing, increasing access, and promoting stability. And these are a number of different just mechanisms to do that. So when we talk about building new, we need funding, incentives, and land. When we talk about preserving the existing, we need, again, funding. We need some tax assistance. We think of older homeowners and keeping their land. So we've got there's tax freeze programs. Rehab work to make any homes or maybe even apartment buildings good quality and be safe. Increasing access is connecting people to resources when they're experiencing a housing crisis, talking about lowering those barriers, and helping educate folks on their fair housing rights. And then promoting stability are some tenant protections once people are in. Loss prevention, which is some foreclosure assistance, different things like that, and fair housing. We don't do direct housing assistance, but what we see our role in is connecting and aligning and bringing together folks so there's so many organizations in this space, bringing everyone together around the table and saying, okay, you have this role in helping us address our housing insecurity problem.
Can I, on
Sure.
stability, it seems like I get a lot of calls all the
Yeah.
time, like
A lot of what?
calls like,
Oh,
hey,
okay.
my landlord's doing this, or hey, so-and-so's landlord's doing this, can you help them find? And it's really hard to find advocates in that space. Is there any talk about expanding tenant protections and offices to do that? Are you about to talk about that?
So you see this big X on the next page?
Coming up.
At least once a week, I get a phone call from like a friend of a nanny's cousin, or like what, and it's, because I practice law, so I must know all
Right.
the possible lawyers.
Exactly, so,
Can I add what you just said though,
yeah.
but about we have to get people to do it? There was, the people that built the affordable apartments by the Home Depot in North Nashville, Dominic, or?
Dominion, by the Lowe's,
By the
Broward
Lowe's,
Parkway.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
Dominion.
remember when they came in, there was a tax incentive, and I remember all like, what are you doing to make sure these people get out, financial literacy? We can't require them to do that, but don't you think if we're giving you this, we need them to move up or understand financially? Is there ways we can tag that onto opportunities if we have Metro funding to help them get out of their situation? I mean, it's just being educated, so just didn't know if we
So-
have a role in that too, so just.
So here's my position on local resources and incentives. We make the rules. In the mixed income pilot that our team created and that is administered by the Health and Ed Board, we are adding for this next round some, because we have a lot of interest in it, some priority criteria. That is, tell us some amenities that you are offering for the tenants there, such as are you offering a daycare or any assistance there? Do you have connections to financial literacy programs? So there are ways that we can include policy considerations in the incentives as we award them, not just asking them to do some affordability, but also asking them to go above and beyond.
And that's what we brought up, is what are you doing over and above, if we get this incentive for our people to understand and move up, so thank you.
And what's been lacking is there's been no overall city policy around these things, and that's what we'll be working on. And we'll be working with all of the boards and commissions and different departments in this space for all of us to understand what these policy priorities are for our city. And so as you all are considering incentives, it's already out there for someone to see, and it's not looking like it's a very subjective requirement, but this has been something that we've adopted as a city that we want to see when we use our metro resources to incentivize a project. But back to limitations, so I wish I had a box of magic wands and could do a lot of things, but I get a lot of questions. Why can't we just require this development to do affordable housing? Well, the state of Tennessee does not allow us to have inclusionary zoning, which means that we can't require any developer to include housing. This is private without any, so what I'm talking about now has no metro resource in it. They've gone beyond that to say when we are considering a rezoning, we cannot consider, the planning commission nor the council cannot base their decision on rezoning on whether or not housing has any affordability in it. So that has totally been preempted by the state of Tennessee. The other thing is, it's just a basic constitutional issue. We can't intervene in a private sale. We can't tell one landowner who they can sell their property to or for what purpose. So we can't intervene there and tell your neighbor, no, you can't sell to this developer who's going to knock down this small home and come up with something else. The other thing we can't do is rent control outside of anything that has a subsidy in it. So we can't say new apartments have rents, a portion of their rents at a certain rate. We cannot do that. And then there are some significant limits on tenant protections that have been made. That's really through the Uniform Residential Landlord Tenant Act that because Davidson County is under that act, we have some limitations there. The Legal Aid Society has some really great attorneys, so if you've got any folks to connect there, they're really savvy in this space of helping navigate that. But this is where I say, though, having great fair housing education, because some of it could bump up against fair housing rights, and that's where we haven't been super strong in helping people understand what those are, and that's some areas that we can make improvements in. So on to primary functions of our division, bucketed into 4 areas. One is around strategic initiatives. The second one's around data and policy. The third one's around resident resources, and the fourth one is around development tools. You guys, the IDB really plays a role in the strategic initiatives, data and policy, and developer tools. I have a couple of slides at the end that really articulate this, but I'm gonna, as I'm going through, talk about ways you all can plug in. Our first piece of strategic initiatives is our communications and outreach. Things that we're working on. I've been working on building a website since I started, but every time I sit down to it, something else lands on my desk, but we're gonna get there. But one of the things that we will do is be that clearinghouse for all the public development tools. So as you all have, we will link to you, and I've created a little table for developers to easily navigate to say, if I'm looking to do this at this AMI level, these are the different tools that could help out, and then they can jump off through a link and get more information. We're not going to reinvent the wheel of trying to describe everything you guys are doing. But that is in that we want to be that one-stop shop around housing tools and resources. We are probably coming before the website is a newsletter we're working on creating that can come out with announcements and things. So as you can use us for that. Community engagement, and I'll add stakeholder engagement. We don't have a position of we're only going to come and meet with you when we have a project we want to tell you we want to do to you or your community. We want to always be plugged in, sitting in an audience and just hearing other people talk. I have a very thick skin. If people want to criticize housing and how the city's responded, I want to hear that as much as I want to hear, like, great job, Angie. But being parts of these conversations and being able to engage with you and just developers and residents, so that's a big key. And then we're looking to figure out how to get some development forums where we can connect people that are looking for funding and have property and know how to build all together to make those connections. So that's just part of our communication and outreach.
Hey, Angie?
Yeah.
That's a lot of items.
Yeah.
When it goes, and I was thinking, when it goes back to staffing, will your office be staffed up to be able to actually do all this?
So as I have brought on people, it's been in a strategic way with people with skill sets, but we do have, being within planning, we have their infrastructure too. We have Rochelle Albright as a communications director, and we've got a new staff person as a graphic designer. We actually built out like the format that we want for the newsletter. They've taken it back. They're working out the graphics, so then we can come back with, like, we know how many words to put in each one. So we've got infrastructure within planning we're building on too.
I know how
Yeah.
communities sometimes,
Oh, yeah.
they get information after the fact, and they say no one reached out to us, and I know it
Right.
takes a lot of people and structure to ensure that happens.
Well, we had a phenomenal intern over the summer, and we're using this new database that's going to also have a CRM, client relations management piece to it that'll really help us stay on top of that, not just a spreadsheet that we just.
So we gotta funnel people to the website,
Yeah.
make sure they know that it exists, so they can go there,
Yeah.
get information, okay.
If I may,
Yeah.
quick question, just because we're on property utilization.
Oh, yeah.
So with the tax properties, can you, not to do too much, but if you could give a quick overview on that, because obviously when properties come up for delinquency, they're auctioned off, and then, if I myself, purchase the property, the original owner still has a year of redemption period. So how is that fitting into your strategy on the delinquent property piece?
So what I get,
Okay.
and tax delinquent properties, is the only kind of properties our team has any authority to review and comment on.
Okay.
We don't get those until they have gone through the redemption period.
Okay.
So what happens is whatever is auctioned is auctioned. What's left has that redemption period. When
Okay.
that's been satisfied, the director of public property sends me a list and said, these are ready to surplus. Do you find any, let us know if you see any that are buildable. So we do an analysis. We look for things like, do they meet minimum lot size? Do they have street frontage? Are there any other environmental constraints? And we grant those through the Barnes Fund to nonprofits.
Okay.
And so that's how we make those available. But a lot of times, most of those properties are scraps or
Right.
unusable.
I'm giving you an
Because the
example.
other ones have already been purchased.
Yes,
At
yes.
the tax sale.
Yeah,
So,
so
but-
that's where.
But it's some though.
It's
We've
some.
gotten some.
We've, since, I don't know when the Barnes Fund started
Sure.
using properties, but there have been over 100 properties awarded since. Delinquent properties awarded to nonprofits through this
Solid.
process.
So to give you an example, our organization, we received some of those properties through the Barnes Fund.
Delinquent properties?
Delinquent properties,
Okay.
and there's 0 lots, and they're not buildable. So we have to go through the process, of course, clearing them, combining the lots to get them to a size that you can build on. So your department, will they do that first, or will that still be on us with those type of lots?
We're gonna have more levels of what I hope to do, and it's still, we've got to get lots of lawyers on this.
Yes.
But really, I wanna get to the point, what we make available, it can be put to use immediately, or as
That'd be
soon as
good.
possible.
Yes.
And it may mean we might have a period where we don't have any properties to make available while we're doing this analyses, but once we get a process in place and staff in place and all the guidance that we can do, we can churn these out in a much more efficient manner. But we do want to take the burden off of the nonprofits having to assemble the land and do that title clearing. To be honest, there have been properties awarded over 5 years ago that still haven't been built on because of the title issues.
I would say the title issues, we can handle because combining is really just a civil engineer thing, submitting. But the taxes, the liens, all that
Yeah.
thing, the title,
Yeah,
the clouded titles.
clouded
You have to
titles,
do-
yeah.
Are
You have
the
to do
biggest
quiet
issue.
title sometimes.
Yeah,
You gotta
where.
quiet them, yes.
And that's where the Land Bank Authority and state law gives us some
Okay.
authorities that we don't currently have without that creation.
So
So
if that
that's
could be
what we're
addressed, I
looking.
think that's the biggest
Yeah.
issue.
That part is going to get better.
Yes.
For developers like
Yeah.
Fort Member, right? Okay.
And then the other thing I get asked about though is the other metro properties, because there's a lot of folks can go to a map and look and see what's vacant.
Landowners.
I
That's my next
can't-
question.
Yeah, I can't look at a map and pluck that out and say, oh, let's use this for housing. In the city right now, properties held by different departments. Parks has a portfolio, water, schools, NDOT, planning and housing, we actually don't hold any property. And I can't go to another department and say, I wanna use that for housing.
Can you
So,
ask?
well, we can ask, but it's not even as simple as that. Because the more I get into this, the more complicated
I know, this is a
it
big
has,
topic. It is.
has become, because you have to look at how the property was acquired by that department. Was it used by a funding source that restricts it, where they bought by water bonds or GO bonds that still have some debt on it? Were they donated and have a reversionary clause that if it's no longer used for this use that Metro is doing, it actually can't be used for anything else? So it's not just a simple thing. And then there are other competing city interests, like this might be a space for a library or a community center or a police station. So there's a lot that's going into it. Planning received funding for 3 new positions in this budget that they're gonna work on to help look at some of the real property challenges, particularly around looking at what could be some of the best uses, and even co-locating some uses like housing with another public use. So we're making some progress in that direction, but we actually have a Metro department who is interested in conveying a couple of their parcels to us, but we're held up with that. They were purchased with a source of funds and not sure that how we can develop it.
Right.
And so it's not fatal to our progress, but it's making it very slow. And so it's not, and then is it zoned?
Correct.
And of course, if you have to be rezoned, you've got to have the council member support, you got to have some community support. So
I will
It's
say
a-
land is one of the
Yeah.
major issues of not being able to put units on the
Yeah.
street in the city. We need more land available to us.
Absolutely. And I'll even say, I got a list that I was so excited when I got it. It had like 300 vacant residential properties on it. Yeah, over 200.
Owned by,
Well, by public.
okay.
When I looked at it, over 200 of those are owned by the airport and are adjacent to B&A.
So those, that's a no-go.
That's a no-go.
Right.
But that's when people say, oh, we've got this list with 2,500 properties. These are showing up vacant, but when you do that due diligence, you're like, that's not appropriate. Yeah, so there's lots to it.
So, quick question on the hurdles. If Metro creates a policy that forces certain divisions to co-locate, could that expedite some of the process?
I welcome any conversation to coordinate our use of land.
Okay.
And you all may want to look at any powers you all may have on acquisition.
We are allowed to own property.
That's right.
In fact, it was our entire former mission statement.
Get them donations coming in.
So, yes. And the Barnes Fund can accept property donations, so anyone watching out there that would like to donate property,
Plug.
please reach out. So one of our biggest ones is this unified housing strategy. We have lots of housing conversations and efforts. MDHA administers the federal HUD programs on behalf of the city. They do what's called a consolidated plan. They do a lot of housing analyses and talk about the use of their federal programs. You guys are talking about your role in housing. We have the Housing Trust Fund Commission, who are like, are we like the housing body? But now that we have the housing division, we can bring all of that together under one roof and not take over anything, but say, here are all the things happening. Let's use all the same terminology. Let's have the aligned policy goals, aligned income targeting, aligned geographic targeting, just various things like that, because your role and your tools might not work for example, creating permanent supportive housing, where Barnes Fund and some MDHA grant programs might be the appropriate tool, but when we're trying to figure it out and no one's talking or there's no strategy and everyone understands their place, we're either duplicating efforts or we have a major gap. And I'm really big on stretching all of our dollars. And our mixed income pilot, we actually don't allow any other Metro incentive or Barnes Fund to be used, because we want to stretch those incentives, because if we keep layering everything in, we're not getting more. We're just
It's that.
keeping it, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're looking at this, the alignment of resources, this resource allocation, doing a deep dive in what do we have? Is it right-sized for our need? And what are we not utilizing? We have some other state opportunities. People think the state's really impeded us, but we have some authorities. We have transit-oriented redevelopment districts that offer TIF. That's through MDHA we've never utilized. You all have talked about some of your tools and how you want to utilize those. System alignment, that's around all this planning work, just targeting the right housing types and tenure, whether we want to focus on homeownership or rental, affordability targets, and then our regulations and policies. This housing strategy will look at the impact of our regulatory environment on housing. This is our land use policy. These are our land use policies, building codes, various things like that. So we have we're in the backside of phase 1 of the unified housing strategy, which we've had a consultant doing a market value analysis. We've invited Nigel to participate. We've had representatives from various departments that have a role in housing on this. It's not public yet because they're doing another step, which is a countywide displacement risk ratio analysis. That's going to be super informative. And along with that is an economic development investment study that will help go along with the economic development strategy that LaTanya's leading. data and policy work, and I'll just run through this, but I'm going to bring it back up at the end. We have our first ever public-facing housing dashboard. This was something out of the task force report. There's now an ordinance around this that applies to you guys too, and I'll go over that at the end. We're starting out really with a full Barnes Fund inventory, but we are, it's going to grow in what it showcases by the end of this calendar year, and then be updated. It's on our planning website right now. The other thing.
This is already up.
Mhm.
Okay.
It is. And I can, when I do the PDF version, I'll make sure this is
It's
a
a
live
link.
link.
Okay, thank you.
And the other thing that our policy analyst has been doing is a housing security roundtable, again, bringing together lots of public organizations that are in the housing space, state agencies, and other organizations, to say what are the metrics we all should be using to measure housing security, and how can we all get on the same page. So that's been a very useful conversation. We're working on housing fact sheets to address our favorite NIMBYs in the world. If you don't know what a NIMBY is, it's not in my backyard. That's probably one of our biggest barriers to housing besides funding and land. And we're working on these policy fact sheets that could be downloaded from our website, or we could email to that clarifies what we mean by affordable housing, and not just in the AMI, but your hairstylist that you see once a month or every 6 months makes around 60% of the AMI. These restaurants that you want in your neighborhood, their servers make, about 60% or 50% of AMI. We hear a lot about teachers and firefighters, but when we get away from talking about the people and talking about the income target, that's the disconnect and the reaction people have. And so we're working on fact sheets that equate that to people and professions, and that developers can take to community meetings and say, this is what we mean. The other one is the impact of housing, especially affordable housing, on crime, on property values, just dispelling all of the myths of housing. So
I'll send you some more data on the
Okay.
property values that just came out.
perfect. And then just very quickly, resource connections. As I mentioned, we're not a direct provider of any resident resources, but we are dedicating a portion of our website to collecting information on the public resources that exist. And you'll see this bullets. These are really going to be links where people could go there and say, I need help locating housing. It would link to a page. This is not live, and so not yet, but this is what we're working towards. We do respond to constituent inquiries around housing, and we are working on displacement coordination guide, that when displacement might happen as a result of redevelopment or a natural disaster, what could Metro's response be? We can't, again, because of some state laws, we can't go too far in the requiring of developers to do certain things. But I get lots of calls from developers who say, hey, I may be doing something that may displace some residents. What can we do? And we need to be able to say X, Y, Z, and give them some great resources there. So we're working on that. This one is probably where you're most interested, developer tools. When I mentioned what we're constructing for the website will look something like this with all the tools listed. It will include MDHA's and THDA's tools as well. And then whatever you all create here. And then there will be, obviously if you click on one of these programs, it'll open up more information, the program guides, any applications, all of that. So it should be just an easy at-a-glance thing, instead of having to read through and trying to figure out which one applies to me.
What is CHIP?
CHIP is, oh, great. It is Connecting Housing to Infrastructure Program. Flip over to the next one. These are like our big 3 ones that we have right now. So what we found is affordable housing developers, all developers are sometimes asked to do some enhanced infrastructure improvements by Metro Department. And they don't carry those in their performance. And for affordable housing developers, that they just can't make those work. And we're not talking about water on site. That should be part of a developer's due diligence, and that are carried in a pro forma. But, for example, NDOT may ask, oh, could you do some, you're near an intersection, could you do some enhanced signalization, or extend this sidewalk, or add a bus station? And so we actually have funding through the capital spending plan to support, we're looking to support any affordable housing project where 100% of the units are income restricted. It's essentially works like a participation agreement where we'll come in and provide some funding. The developer will still have to do some, but it is a way to help do those enhanced infrastructure. We're right now piloting this with NDOT enhanced infrastructure, so we funded our first one, which is what's called a hawk signal at an intersection, and so we still have a lot of money left, so if you've got a project, come talk to us about it.
Question.
Yeah.
Infrastructure does include water improvement, water line improvements.
So we don't, right now, we're only doing the NDOT enhanced. Water has its own participation agreement program, so we're
Yes.
looking, we don't wanna duplicate that, so that's why we started with the NDOT one. We may look some at the parks enhanced infrastructures too, like trailheads, that might be next on a list, but, because water has that enhanced,
Right.
their participation program, that's what we kinda modeled this on.
Okay, yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
called CHIP?
CHIP, yeah.
I know you don't like to stack incentives,
Mhm.
but TIF was super helpful for Madison Station.
Right.
And, would you consider stacking TIFs for infrastructure on some of these, or is that just gonna be totally separate?
So, TIF is such a big, complicated thing, and TIF, an IDB TIF, don't you all have to do like an economic impact study?
They do, they're expensive,
Yeah.
I mean, there has to be like $40 million worth of
Yeah.
infrastructure, but it turns out you can get there really quickly.
But if there's a project that works, because that's just a different kind of project than what we're putting here, because an IDB TIF can't really go in, it can't go into vertical construction, is that correct? It's for infrastructure improvements, you can't do
Yes.
sticks and bricks.
From my understanding, yes.
Yeah. So that would be, that would be a great, like, Barnes Fund.
Okay.
If someone wanted to, which I think Madison Station might have gotten some Barnes funding to make that affordable. So here's the thing with TIF, it's like a but-for, and because I did some TIFs at MDHA. I've always used the but-for analysis. We're asking you, we have these policy goals for you doing this, for us giving you this, so you need to tell us your gap to make this work. But it's limited with what are TIF eligible expenses and uses. And so if we ask for a lot of affordability to be able to do this for some other improvements, yes, we would want to come in and say, how can we help make them get to this affordability goal? Because we know that it may not work with just the TIF. So Barnes Fund, rental assistance might work. CHIP probably wouldn't be the right one because they're already using that for some infrastructure improvements. Obviously, a tax abatement wouldn't work because you're using the future taxes. That's the TIF piece, where an abatement, you're foregoing the property tax for a smaller payment. A TIF is you're using, and I'm going back to the MDHA when they were non-recourse loans, and that increment paid down those loans.
Yes.
Yeah.
They are non-recourse.
Yeah.
With Madison Station,
Yeah.
it was nice though, because we were able to get that restrictions agreement for
Yeah.
30 years
Yeah.
in exchange for that.
Exactly. And then, but like I said, we've got programs. The Catalyst Fund that I'm about to talk about could be another one to help with the actual construction. So there are,
Also like the Affordable Housing Gap Program right now.
Yes.
It's a one-time fund source, but it's there for a gap.
Yeah.
But the project wouldn't exist if you don't get
Right.
these funds.
and while we excluded other like Barnes Fund and other Metro tools from the mixed income pilot, we specifically created that program to buy down affordability in housing that was going to be built regardless. And so we were like, we've got enough demand for Barnes Fund through our nonprofits that we rely, and again, because it's also limited to nonprofits, we were like, we're not gonna require all of these to be affordable. We're giving you an option to do, and you figure out how to make the numbers work with this tax abatement that we're doing. And that's just another way to get more units through a different type of developer that would not participate in any of our programs.
Correct. Yes.
Except for that one. So that was a public policy consideration, but on a larger economic development piece, we need to look at how we layer to get everything without over subsidizing. And we can do that. We can work with y'all on that. We've got some rescue plan funds. We had 25 million, 5 million went to MDHA. This just gives you an idea of what some of those are. We're specifically targeting housing for older adults, pathways to equitable homeownership for, we can't do race-based participation, but we can target it to populations that historically have been disenfranchised in the homeownership business, which our data tells us who that is. And then we're gonna do a new product called co-op housing for families. I'm super excited. We don't do co-ops in the South much at all, or some places, but, so we're looking to do those. Those will come all through the Barnes Fund. And then our newest tool is the Catalyst Fund. You heard Josh mention it in the last one. This is, we're taking $20 million of rescue plan funds. It's going to be administered by the Community Foundation with Forsyth Street Advisors as our fund manager. This is to create a very nimble product. It's going to live outside of Metro for lots of reasons. But it is to give access to capital for mission-driven nonprofit or for-profit developers, really to preserve existing income-restricted housing or even naturally occurring affordable housing. We're looking at creating, at the beginning, 3 products around pre-development cost, acquisition, and then high-impact development. We're working with banks to hopefully get rates that are lower than, that are more concessionary and favorable. So I want to talk about this, as Josh mentioned, a revolving loan fund. Yeah, we don't have enough money in our market. But one of the big things I hear about, and I would love to hear you guys maybe talk about this in your future conversations around development, is access to capital and credit for small, especially minority developers, we don't have the tools for that. Barnes Fund isn't. It's to get sticks and bricks construction out there. Catalyst Fund with the pre-development loans, it starts making that some progress in that space, but any as you're thinking about loans for small businesses, also include in there small developers, so that they can get, because we're starting to also look at our regulations around missing middle housing and doing smaller scale or medium scale developments, which is that sweet spot that some of the smaller developers could help us do, but they just can't even get their foot in the door because they can't get access to that capital. And so that would be a really great way to complement some of this other work that we're doing.
So microlending, new market tax credits, how do we work with that with the people of color? I mean, that's not your job, but we need to.
I mean, I love new market tax credits. Josh has heard me like anybody that says new market tax credits, because we're an underserved market, we don't do those here.
So I did one
Yeah.
for Plaza Mariachi years ago.
Oh, yes.
And I had to gather all that information, and it's very, very, it's discipline and getting all that information. And we looked at it a long time ago when I first got on the board to see what we could do to get that. I think we had someone in Memphis doing it, new market tax credit. So huge incentives there on a federal. But I think microlending to our people of color or just everyone is what we don't have enough of. So so I'm just seeing that's just a big void, and that's gonna stimulate economic prosperity for these small businesses. And I know Pathways is doing a good job of trying to do that, but not enough out there.
And I think that's what has to be elevated as we have these strategic planning initiatives. As the Prosper Nashville evolves, there must be a place where that's picked up. And we've talked, Latanya and I, about, housing is driven by or a driver of economic development. Economic development, people need places to live. So as we're doing our respective strategic work, is, all right, what are you learning here that I need to incorporate, and vice versa, and where are we seeing the gaps that I need? We would love to see more minority developers in the housing space. We would like to see more minority realtors, appraisers, because when people look like you, they understand your barriers and your experiences, but it's also just wealth building. We have a huge racial wealth gap. So I can say, I'm seeing this. My tools aren't structured there, but what tools do you have that could help in this space and to get to these common public policy goals that we have?
Okay.
Yeah, that's
know.
as far as I can
I
go
know,
with
I
that,
think
yeah.
that's, as we
Yeah.
look at the demographic shift
Yeah.
happening, and understanding who's buying the homes.
Mhm.
I mean, they're moving out. They're going to Smyrna,
Yeah,
Laverne.
absolutely.
Laverne is the most diverse community we have in the state of Tennessee, but we're losing that, but obviously we're gaining other stuff, but okay, so.
But we don't want to lose our
It's our
families.
workforce.
We don't want to lose our workforce. We don't want to lose our diverse population. We want to embrace it and support it. So it is walking lockstep with the economic development position of the city to say we also people need to work here and have businesses here, but they also need to live here. And so how do we approach that comprehensively?
And then the challenge goes, what's the internal infrastructure of your department, to reflect the community we serve? So.
Exactly. And there are leadership opportunities around that.
And to your point, and this board has talked about this previously, but the Amazon development program with the Urban League.
Brand Academy.
That's right. And they obviously, and they came, I think we had a representative, their executive director with the program probably a year and a half ago, January 2022 maybe, come and speak to us, and a representative from Amazon. But this board passed some economic incentive deals for Amazon several years ago. But they're about to finish, I think their inaugural class is finished in this year. So that's certainly an opportunity for this board to partner. And it was pretty interesting, 'cause I recently was on their website, and I was just reading the bios of a lot of the developers. Some of them I'd heard of. So what's exciting is, these are folks, they've done development, so hopefully going through that program will help. And to your point,
Yeah.
and I think the point we're making, you have to have people in that field that pay more attention to it. But in my conversations with the director of the program, that's still one of the items when we spoke several months ago was about access to capital. Still.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity here. I mean, Angie's talking about development forums back here. So if there's an opportunity for us to invite those developers in Red Academy or other similar initiatives,
Absolutely.
and then introduce them to the same developers that are getting Barnes funds or Amazon funds, or maybe creating programs that encourage them to come to the IDB. Like if there's my comment earlier about the JV partnerships, like there's a role for the IDB, in my view, to partner with those developers to make sure that we're encouraging equity in our development. And I think that's a great thing that we can do to fill in the gaps that Angie's developing.
Greg, thank you for your comments. Has your department done anything with the program and like going to speak to those
Oh,
developers?
yes.
Okay.
We meet with Clifton and Iran. I've presented to the Red Academy on because I've been in this space as a funder and a developer for a really long time, and my presentation was actually on what not to do when applying for, bidding on a government
Sure.
program or project. I know the Barnes Fund staff have presented a couple of times. Hannah has presented on some of our tools. One of the things that we have at Metro Council codified last year, or this past session, I guess, a small organization set aside. So 20% of all of our Barnes funds is set aside for small organizations. And that means they've got a balance sheet, I think it's $500,000 or less. But they still have to have that front end capital piece before they can get to where they're really going to compete for that money. And that's a sweet spot maybe that you all are talking about. I will share with you, our team is applying for a $10 million grant through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. It's due the end of next month. They don't give you, it dropped Thursday.
Already on it,
Yeah.
because you're staffed up now.
Yeah, well, they previewed it for about 3 weeks beforehand. But it's called Pathways to Removing Obstacles to Housing. And HUD is actually being very flexible in the use of the dollars, and they're really looking at jurisdictions who are making progress in certain things. So among the activities we're looking at, well, half of it, $5 million, we're looking at just sticks and bricks. We're really going to focus on 0 to 30 and permanent supportive housing with this particular type of money. But one other piece is some technical assistance and capacity building for small and minority-owned developers or women-owned, DBEs, I will say. And then another one around creating a guide for faith-based institutions to do development. That we hear that a lot. That's a really big untapped opportunity. They're the largest institutional landowners in Davidson County. And then another one looking at how we can do some more missing middle housing. So that will actually have some community engagement around that. So we'll make sure and get the word out to everybody.
One interruption before you move
Yeah.
on. I've been in some conversations with the Urban League and actually have 2 other meetings coming up in the next couple of weeks about that access to capital for developers. Minority-owned businesses too, but specifically for the developers that are coming out of that Red Academy and others for that next cohort as well.
Yeah, outstanding.
And the other thing I just, y'all probably know this, and I'm sure your bond counsel or your counsel will advise, but again, whatever incentives you have that's a debt product, you must look at the project and what can be paid from that. That's just a critical piece. For example, if you really want to target deeply affordable housing, a debt product is not the right product for that because they don't cash flow to pay back any type of loan. So a bond issuance that requires a debt repayment, it might be great for 60 to 100% or something like that. But just be mindful as you all are talking through these things. And our team can always come and provide you with the data that you can see the gaps in the income targets and run some financial models or whatever to see what you all want to target with some things.
So one tool that we've utilized is the tax exempt bonds piece, but it still it's
Yeah.
not our money per se,
Yeah,
but
right.
those bonds still have to be repaid and tax exempt, so hopefully developers get a lower interest rate. But what would you see, and maybe you're getting to this, but what would you see as in addition to something like that? That's what we've done. So we've done 2 deals for Dominium. That's what we did, tax exempt bonds.
Were they a LIHTC?
They were at 4%.
Yeah, they were 4%. So that just comes along with what that 4% requires. But if you're doing any kind of bond issuance outside of another subsidy like a LIHTC, that's where because the 4% brings in an equity that helps that bond repayment
Sure.
happen. But if you're looking at just like some kind of standalone bond issuance where there's a debt repayment, that repayment passes on to that developer
Sure.
and how they can cash flow that through their project. So that's just, that's where mixed income that's just some of the things just to be mindful
Sure.
of. It depends on what the other financing they bring to the table. So yeah, I just wanted to just elevate that piece, especially with like a revolving loan fund. That's what we're looking at with Catalyst, is if our public policies are, if we want to do some deeply affordable, the Metro part of the Catalyst Fund might just be the equity in the deal and not all of it be a repayment. So those are different ways to have to think about how we put funding in, and no one deal is the same. So yeah, so just quickly to reiterate, just some things I pointed out for the IDB role. We'll have a larger Metro housing strategy with developer tools. That's IDB incentives are part of that developer tool package, I see. That's aligned with our policies, our income targets. And then if you'll flip over, I will alert you, if you don't know, to BL 2023-1742. That was passed in April. This was led by Council Lady Allen. This is what requires our team to have a public-facing dashboard for all income restricted units that are subsidized through any Metro resource. That's whether it's a grant, a loan, a tax abatement, a tax incentive, through a Metro agency, a board or commission like you guys, or even on behalf of Metro like MDHA does our federal grants. So these are the things that we will be working with you all to capture. We're working on a form to easily capture this information and work with you all. So as you do new awards, we'd like to capture what you've done already.
We
But
have
certainly.
We have that, we got that too.
Yes, okay, yeah,
Yep.
Casey has that.
Yep.
But these are what the legislation requires us to capture, which are the units funded, the status, such as this is when it was awarded, and then we'll be checking in periodically on the completion progress, the affordability terms, the council districts, the income levels, and then the sources of funding. So that way we can also, the sources of funding help us to capture whether or not so we can better deduplicate numbers. And that's it. I'm well over time. And
You're fine.
okay.
That was a lot.
I got a Google invite going till noon.
Okay. All right.
Angie,
Oh,
Yeah.
interrupting. The MDHA units, are MDHA units that are captured within their development projects?
they will be. Right now we're with Barnes Fund, all of our local stuff, and then we're working. We have this new database. So before we started asking MDHA or other folks for a big data dump, we wanted to get this really solid and make it easy for folks to report. Now, it does have LIHTC pilot,
Already?
low-income housing tax credit pilot program in our dashboard, but we don't have like all of MDHA's properties and their units and all of that in here yet in our dashboard. But it will be
It
coming
will.
by the end of the year.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yes.
I'll start right here before you get out of the hot seat.
Oh, shoot, I thought I was done.
I'll just
No,
start
kidding.
here. There's a lot of information, so
Yes.
thank you.
You're welcome.
We always appreciate it.
It's already coming.
Passionate issue, for sure. And a challenge, not an easy solution. But I'll start here. Board Member Wright, any comments or questions that
Very
you
appreciative
have?
of the information. Glad it's coming on board. Glad to see that there's going to be one spot where all the information is. That's been a huge issue, is you have to go here to get everything, so one central location. And that's gonna help the board out a lot, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel over here. We can just link to you. So, no other questions. I think everything was covered. Yeah.
What tools would you like us to create that Metro is not already working on?
So Josh, I'm gonna say, I would just advise working with your council to get a good handle on the tools that you have. And as we get into that deep resource analysis, making sure you all are really understand that, because I will have our consultant really engage with you guys. I'm I'm all about, first, let's see what we've got and are we maximizing it and is it right size before we start creating new. Because when we start creating new, especially if we have to go to the state for any authorities and they look back and say, but you've got this that you're not doing. So that would be one of the biggest things that I just ask that y'all get, and I'm not an expert on the ins and outs of all of your tools. So really just, as you go through your ad hoc meetings, really taking deep dives into that and however we can provide data around that. But that will be part of our overall resource analysis, because I do want the recommendations from that to tell us, like, if Barnes Fund needs triple the money, or if we need to use abatements more, or if we need to have another debt product out there that we're not doing. So that will be coming. I just can't immediately answer new tools other than let's see what we're doing now and maximizing it.
Got it. Thank you.
Vice Chair?
Thank you for your time and everything you're doing. It is a lot. I had several people running for mayor who reached out and said, well, can we just have a list of the properties and start building on them? And I got to explain what that would involve. And I know it's just a lot of work, and it's really important, and I appreciate your partnership.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Go ahead. Board Member Cordova, any questions or comments?
Yeah, I want to echo all my fellow board members about how appreciative we are of the work you're doing. This was super comprehensive. I guess the one thing that I'm curious about is the last piece, the reporting, and essentially, how are we actually monitoring this on a daily and weekly basis to make sure that developers and people that are getting access to this capital and this funding are living up to their expectations? And then what sort of recourse is there? Because I know at the end it says administered by a Metro Agency Board Commission or something, but I'm just kind of curious, who owns the ball in this?
So I'm gonna punt that back on you guys on what your compliance and monitoring is for the tools that you all do. And if there is a gap, we all need to come together and talk about what that enforcement. I don't know what the development agreements with those developers are in that space. I haven't looked at them, but that would be something to talk about with your council. On the reporting, that's just telling us what you all have done. But yeah, we do need to make sure that all of our precious resources are, everything's being done as they were intended to be done. And so I would think that the agreements that were created give the board those authorities on that oversight and compliance. So maybe that's more to explore with your council.
Sure.
And add to your next ad hoc committee meeting.
Yeah.
No, that's a perfect question,
But I
and ad
guess-
hoc can help.
The other part to
Dive
this
into
too
that.
is where is the interconnectivity between the other agencies and how you guys are interacting with each other to make sure that the various projects are the same across each agency, right, or each department?
So we are, we're bringing together, we're using the Housing Data Roundtable as a lot of that, bringing folks that are really deep in this space, like Metro Social Services, Office of Homeless Services, MDHA, so that we're really understanding all of the data and how folks are measuring things. And then as we do our larger housing strategy, is bringing everyone together and saying, okay, what has been your lane and who are you focusing on? Where do we have a gap, or where are you duplicating what another agency is doing? So that is an evolving conversation, but one that we're leading.
Okay, cool. And, sorry.
No, you're
yeah.
fine. I called on you, sir. There you go. You have the floor.
This is the first time I've actually said more than 2 words.
Yeah.
You're getting bold now. You've been here 2 years. Now you're coming out of your
Hey,
shell.
I'm just curious. At the other side of this too is you gave us I can't remember which page it was on, but the little grid of what AMI looked like. Is there data that goes back 10 and possibly 20 years that maps out what that looks like? Because I'm just curious if our need is consistently going up. That one. Yep.
So that AMI data, I can send you the link on the HUD website, but our dashboard that, when I send the PDF, we'll have a live link and you can go to. It actually shows over at least 10 years what we call housing cost burden for renters and homeowners, and that means what percent of renters or what percent of homeowners are paying more than 30% of their income. That's like to me, that's one of the biggest measures of housing security, because when you're paying more than 30% of your income on housing, you're foregoing, some critical things, and that does show what that looks, how that trends. And we also have a graph that shows the trend in rent and housing prices. I think it's prices over that period too. So
Yeah, I'm just
that can
curious
show,
And how
yeah.
the income level has
Yeah.
moved up.
I bet your market value analysis also will dive deep into that
The
too.
market value analysis is dire.
That's fine.
Is dire.
But thank you so much for
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for the great questions.
And the only question I had is kind of piggyback what he was saying is that collaborative mindset. As you keep saying, it's all over the place, and Metro, the lost opportunity of sharing information just blows me away, that someone who doesn't work in government, the streamline stuff. So I really, if you're gonna be that point person or can be that point person or someone's assigned, that eliminates so much duplication.
Yeah.
As well as streamline things. So I see that, and it's just frustrating, but it's still good that you're acknowledging it.
And that, I think, and some of the advocates that have really been behind having this office, because that continuity never survived a change in administration. And what's encouraging is the elevated conversation around housing brings people to the table, and so we're not missing that opportunity.
Right. Thank you. I'm done.
All right, thank you. So, 2 questions for me. So again, thank you. Really
welcome.
appreciate you
Thank you.
coming. So we had at our meeting last year, we had some developers come as well. So a couple items I've heard from developers, and I'm not in affordable housing development, but some of the challenges I've heard are timing on permits, inspections, etc. Is there anything in the works, like if a developer's doing an affordable housing project where, they can get expedited,
Fast track program.
fast track? Is there anything like that in the works?
So we do have a process now that if someone is doing income restricted, and I say that very technically because people will say they're doing affordable housing and try to get in this line, but we've said we will only write these letters for people that have demonstrated income restricted housing. They can, I have a staff person, his name is Markel Mitchell, I can share that with you all. A developer can email him. We have some guidelines and a form for folks to fill out. And if you meet the criteria, we'll write a letter that you can take to the various development services department to get an expedited initial review. But what it doesn't do, obviously, you still have to comply with all zoning
Sure.
regulations, all building codes. This doesn't get you around any of that. But if you do have a note on, it doesn't condense timelines either. You still have to go through the zoning process. But that initial review, it does do that. I would love to explore how we can even make that more efficient, and so I look forward to future conversations in the city. But yeah, we are hearing that. But on the flip side of things, we are introducing in our next Barnes Fund round more requirements around developer due diligence on the application side of things, so that to prompt folks, go ahead and talk to, if you're not zoned, you need to go ahead and have that initial conversation with planning, because you may be proposing on something that our community because we have policies, which is Nashville next, and we have the zoning. If it doesn't meet policy, it probably won't get rezoned, because that requires a text amendment. And so you need to have those conversations before you
Before you even apply.
Before you even
Sure.
apply. You don't need to have the zoning in place, but if we need to see that you're already. We had an issue with the Barnes Fund project, only 6 units, that triggered a whole new water line down a road.
And that's a,
So we wanna make sure, but the developer bought that property years ago before there were other developments. And so when they bought it, it didn't have that trigger. But, so we wanna make sure before you apply, go to Water Services and understand what capacity requirements are gonna be required. It also helps them then build in some things in their performance.
Right.
So it's not just, so we want folks to be also more mindful of what's required to do development in Nashville, because we can't just eliminate things. So we want them to think about it on the front end, and then however we can help with processes as they move through are also things we're exploring.
awesome, yeah, thank you for that. And then lastly, on you mentioned zoning. So that's another item. So I've been very proud of the projects that this board has supported, because they've also been in transit-oriented, what I call transit-oriented development. The two Dominion projects on Dickerson Road, transit. We passed the Madison Station deal, Gallatin Road, another major corridor. And so I was talking with a buddy of mine, I've heard this from developers as well. He was out of town, I think it was San Diego, he was telling me there that they allow, I think maybe Board Member Haston brought this up last year too, but he was saying that they will, especially for like areas like that where you have properties that are on major corridors, that as long as the property is deed restricted for, say, affordable workforce housing, that they're allowed to upzone, like basically increase more density because of that. Is that something that we're looking at?
State law will not allow us
Okay.
to.
Oh, got you. Okay.
To do.
So there's no way around that.
Not for even upzoning, density bonuses, height modifications. No.
Got you.
Now, what we are doing through some of our tools, like the Mix and Compile It and Barnes Fund, we do evaluate whether they are along a corridor in the urban zoning overlay, have access to transit, things like that. But with the zoning, we cannot use any affordability as a component of that consideration.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time today. We're greatly
welcome.
appreciative. Thank you to everybody on the board. It's really, really informative meeting as always. It's exciting. I think this is an exciting time. So it is, we're
Can
here.
I make a comment?
Oh, yes, go ahead.
I want to acknowledge Maya Powell here. She's with the Urban League. And the reason I'm acknowledging her, just because she just got in that position there. She's a Hume-Paul grad, University of Memphis.
HFA, let's go.
University of
I might have been there before you, but that's okay.
University of Memphis grad, and my daughter's best friend, and I've known her since 5th grade. So she texts me, she's going to be here. I'm like, what meeting? I mean, where would I be with her? And I just love to see a young lady Nashvilleian that's here today. So I just want to say thank you for being here and being involved in the Urban League and everything you do.
And you went to Hume Fog, right?
Sorry, I just had to throw that in and embarrass her.
So I'm here representing the Red Academy today. So that's the department that I work in. So I'm glad to hear being present in the room without y'all even knowing. So.
There you go.
Thank you for coming in. Thanks to everybody for coming.
Yes.
We have so many guests here today.
Yep, absolutely. All right, well, with that said, with there being no further business, we'll call this meeting to adjournment. And I thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
So I still have